Sorry about that, everybody. I had a hard time getting over. We'll give everybody a couple more seconds to get over, but we know there's a short amount of time in this breakout room, so we're not going to give too much time.
Gives me a moment to figure out the share screen.
Yeah, we'll as soon as Christy figures out the, there we go. So first of all, thanks everybody for joining this evening in this breakout room. We wanted to hit on a couple of the high level items for the energy code and the Denver Green Code. And then if there's any questions regarding the mechanical plumbing or fuel gas code, I'll be glad to field those questions as well. So let's quickly run through so these were the same list that Eric presented. I just wanted to touch on a couple of them. The first two were the electrification requirements, and these will become effective not May 1st, 2023, but they will become effective January 1st, 2024. So there's a little bit of time associated with this one to plan and wrap our arms around the electrification requirements. There are exceptions associated with these requirements, and specifically like large boilers will not be required to be electrified. These were intended to be aligned with Energized Denver existing building requirements. The next three items of the PUI, Appendix G site energy, and Appendix G should be cost budget modeling metric. The important thing to realize about this is that this replaces C407 in the IECC. And so this is a major shift for commercial performance building energy compliance. We tried to leave Appendix G alone as much as possible. We of course made the compliance a little bit more restrictive, but we tried to leave it as alone as much as possible to hopefully ensure we didn't break anything in adopting that. But in doing that, we also added the flexibility of creating a site energy. And then the PUI is a completely new method, and it's modeling just the energy use of the building. And the idea behind this was, as Energized Denver moves the existing buildings to performance targets, there was definitely a demand that we have something similar in the new building compliance of looking at EUIs. So getting everybody on the same lingo. Chapter or number 6, the commercial prescriptive path. This was similar to what's in the base 2021 IECC, but we've added, there's more credits required to demonstrate compliance, but we've also added many different ways to earn the credits. And so that's important. And then we also have an all electric building path that requires less credits. And so to help encourage that electrification. And then Eric did a pretty good job of covering number 7. So next slide. Residential, there wasn't as drastic changes. There was just upping the requirements to demonstrate compliance. So the compliance paths were just bumped up to help align with Denver's long range goals for energy conservation. The number 10, the minimum renewables of 50% was the major one. But like Eric said, there's multiple exceptions, and the exceptions typically are if you meet the performance path, but go beyond an extra 9%. If you do the ERI path, you can get an extra 5 points. Or if you're doing the points path of R408, if you earn 13 energy efficiency points, you can be exempt from adding the minimum renewables. There are lots of energy code amendments, so I encourage everybody to look online and review the draft and ask questions in the draft. It's alive. You can upvote, and if you see a question you like, you can upvote it, and we'll definitely respond. Next slide. So I wanted to quickly touch on the Energized Denver requirements for electrification of existing buildings, because it definitely has impacts for how those permits will be issued starting March 1st, 2023. Next slide. So any gas-fired furnace, water heater, and then air conditioners serving heated spaces will no longer be eligible for a quick permit starting March 1st, 2023, with the major exception being if it's emergency replacement, and the definition is on the screen. Essentially, if there's one piece of equipment failing, that can be replaced as an emergency. But if water heaters throughout an apartment building, that wouldn't be considered an emergency because there's more than one piece of equipment. So let's look at what the requirements are going to be for the review. Next slide. So you'll see commonalities here, but when a gas-fired furnace is replaced, or they'll need to comply with or demonstrate compliance with two of the three bullets posted: an electrification feasibility report, which will be reviewed by our partner agency, CASR. The equipment will need to be, the size will need to be verified per the energy code. Or you can have all gas piping that's serving that gas piece of equipment that's being replaced be pressure tested back to the meter. And then the exceptions, obviously when it's emergency replacement, and to emphasize, this does not apply to gas-fired boilers. Next slide. So this is the water heater section. So when gas-fired water heaters are replaced, they'll need to be submitted with an electrification feasibility report, or you only have to choose one of these two items, and then the all gas piping serving the water heater back to the meter can be pressure tested instead of the electrification feasibility report. And the exceptions are the same: emergency replacement, gas-fired boilers. This section doesn't apply, and those can still be issued as a quick permit. And then I'll turn it over to Christy, and I guess I'll introduce myself too. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Chuck Bartel. I'm the mechanical plumbing plan review engineer supervisor. If there's any questions after this, feel free to reach out to me directly, charles.bartel@denvergov.org. Christy, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thanks. So I will talk very briefly about Denver Green Code, but I am happy to talk more and respond to any questions. Just to run quickly through a few things. Denver Green Code in 2022 is organized into chapters that address topics. So the items on the left-hand side of the screen are those major topics that get addressed in the 2022 Denver Green Code. In the future, we expect more topics to be addressed, and so it's something to watch in the future. But for 2022, that's where we are with topical chapters. And as Eric mentioned, addressing climate change mitigation, natural resource balance, and community resilience through the different provisions. So in 2022, we changed the structure to make it more clear what a provision is. There are 119 boxed out provisions that talk about different things that would need to be done in a project. Each chapter has a certain number of provisions. And then the limited mandatory use requirement that Eric mentioned ties to, excuse me, a number of limited compliance requirements for each chapter. It's a very low number. So for example, site sustainability, new commercial projects will have to comply with 4 of the 19 provisions in that chapter. Major renovations will have to comply with 2 of the 19 in that chapter, and so forth. So 1 for water use efficiency, 1 for commercial energy, 1 for indoor environmental quality, 3 for new buildings, 1 for major renovations in materials and resources, and then 2 for construction and plans for operation. The reason why the requirements are so low is, again, it's just to, as Eric talked a little bit about, it's to get everybody familiar with the material that's in here. It's requirements that maybe the community isn't ready yet to see made mandatory right now, but we would like to see those things move to become mandatory in coming years, hopefully in near coming years, to support the pursuit of the Comp Plan 2040 vision for Denver. So there's number one is the new limited mandatory use that I just talked about. Number two is a voluntary enhanced use. This is similar to the 2019 pilot program. 4 pathways for compliance. Projects receive facilitated review processes and faster permit review processes in exchange for signing up to and committing to pursuing a higher level of compliance with the requirements that are in the Denver Green Code. So there's the as written path, which is a larger number of the provisions that we just talked about, a larger number of those 119 provisions. There's also pursuit of a zero net energy all electric building, LEED Platinum certification, or passive house certification, plus pursuit of non-energy as written chapter requirements. There's also an ecological impact statement that's added that's kind of a wild card provision that can be used for any of the limited mandatory use requirements. And then why are we doing this? Because our regulations are moving as fast as they can, but they're not fast enough to meet the community's needs. And this is another way for us to introduce ideas into the community so that we can get things into mandatory regulations painlessly a little bit faster, supporting the future livability and viability of our community. So I won't talk through all of this. This is just more detail on that. But I think I'd like to be quiet and see if there are any questions. Fred, please.
Thank you. I've got a couple questions. I don't know whether they are relevant or not. If not, feel free to say so. First question relates to a impending roof replacement. I'm in a high-rise condominium building, and as we replace our roof, we are trying to figure out our path through this. And I understand that one path is to commit to a certain amount of electricity reduction over a certain amount of time. The issue is that we are also being told that our steam supply for both domestic hot water and to service a heat pump system is going to disappear. So if today I commit to an electricity reduction and 5 years from now the steam goes away, my electric bill is going to go up a lot. How is that accounted for? I shouldn't say electric, no, I should say electric consumption.
There are a couple pieces to what you're talking about here, but for the green buildings ordinance piece that would go along with that roof replacement component, it's an energy reduction, not an electricity reduction. So you would not be harmed by the transition. Oh, actually you would, because it's in the EUI. So Courtney, I would value your help speaking to this. Courtney has worked with us from on the energy program option as well.
Sure. I also wanted I'm going to put something in the chat real quick about the steam to electric conversion incentive program that Castor has. That might be something you want to look into as well to help fund that transition there. And I'm sorry, I was looking that up during part of that question. So Fred, I'm happy to follow up with you in more detail for how it would count towards the EUI.
Okay.
Or Energize. Oh, and we're talking about Energize Denver, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I can grab someone over Sharon on the Energize Denver team to help answer that question in more detail.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I also have a general question, something that just came up today. We have a very ancient emergency generator that is currently running on diesel. And we have learned that when we replace it, we could replace it either with diesel or natural gas. Do you have any thoughts about how we should go about evaluating this?
Hi, this is Carol. If you're planning on using a natural gas generator, first you'll want to run that past the fire department because they don't allow it for, my understanding is for emergency, I believe. But you would need to go and speak with Tony Carl concerning that. That is a specific, I think, requirement on their part.
Okay, so modulo the Denver Fire Department, it sounds like we may be stuck with diesel for some time.
It does sound like that. Once again, you will want to talk to Tony Carl because it will depend on the loads on the generator.
Yeah. Well, it was an interesting idea when it was broached, because natural gas isn't quite as smelly as being in a tank room with diesel fuel. Thank you.
And Fred, I do have Sharon J who just chimed in or popped into ours. So if you don't mind giving a quick repeat of that question, Sharon's with the Energized Denver team for the performance path and can help answer that.
Well, I can do it if I unmute. So the question is, we meaning a high-rise condo, are in the process of replacing our roof, and we are looking at the possibility of taking care of the former green roof requirements through an energy plan, which, as I understand it, is based on reducing total electricity consumption. But at the same time, we are being told that within a few years, we will have to abandon the use of steam, both for supplying circulation system for heat pumps, as well as all of our domestic hot water. And if the steam goes to electric, then the electric consumption is going to go way up, and there's no way we're going to reduce it. So is there some way to account for such a conversion if we sign up today for electric consumption reduction?
So one note on the steam part of that question, we're not mandating that anybody actually get off steam. We're going to be, as part of the performance requirements, we're going to be releasing some information in the next couple of months in conjunction with Xcel Energy on guidance for the buildings that are on the steam loop with Xcel Energy and how that works with the performance requirements. There is no mandate that you have to get off. There is a program through CASR if you're looking to get off steam that we could possibly help you with that conversion. So there's a difference also between like the green building ordinance and the performance requirements and the energy requirement that you're talking about in conjunction with the roof. The only thing that we're mandating on the performance requirement side is that you get to a certain energy use intensity, which is any of the fuel mixes altogether. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be all electric by 2030. And since you're in a condominium, we're going to be developing our rules for the performance requirements are going to be adopted next Thursday. There's a public hearing for it. And then we're going to do a lot of outreach in December and January to let everybody know what the final rules were. But we're going to be building out very specific technical guidance for condominiums because we know that is a tough thing to improve. So there's more information coming now. I don't know if I answered all of your specific questions, but that's all I have at the moment.
Yeah, I think fairly close. My ears pick up, but you're not mandating steam reduction. And I'm sorry that I can't come here with firsthand information, but my understanding is that it's Xcel that's telling us, you know, after such and such a date, as yet unspecified, we're not going to give you steam anymore.
So that is not definite yet. They were mandated to do a study of their steam system and make some decisions on it. There's some actions that are happening in the Public Utility Commission that are going to, I believe there's some movement on it in December. There's lots of meetings that are happening between Kaiser and Excel Energy to actually explore what is happening with the STEAM system. But I think the recommendation is to keep it the same through 2030, but that also is something that their study has to come out at the Public Utility Commission hearing that's within the next couple of months. So there's some activity happening with that and what they did to study their STEAM system. So there's more movement happening on that. There's been a lot of rumors that have said the STEAM system is going away, but that's probably not the case. But there's activity happening within the Public Utilities Commission that's going to address that. And
Okay.
some more resources coming out from Kaiser.
Okay, so my takeaway is that it is still very much a moving target, and that indeed, if it goes away, it won't be for at least another 8 years. Have I got that right?
Correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I guess there's a couple hands up. There's a question in the chat talking about C404.10, exception number 5, and hot water heater storage tanks. The intent of that exception is that there's a hot water storage tank associated with a boiler, that we wanted to be explicit that hot water storage tank could be partnered with a gas-fired boiler. Any gas-fired water heater, by definition, and we define what a boiler is, we use the state requirements in our amendments, what defines a boiler, would be allowed. The smaller water heater would need to be electric, unless you met one of the other exceptions. So let's go to a couple of the hands raised. So Mackenzie Glass.
Hi, I'm Mackenzie Glass. I'm Martin Martin's sustainability manager, and we're really excited about all the different global warming potential limits that you guys are coming out with. So just a few quicker questions for you. First, it's my understanding that the global warming potential limits for concrete and steel are in line with all of the other provisions that are going to be approved next year. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, great. And then the second question is, I know that precast concrete and CMU and those different types of materials were left out of the requirements. Is there a reason for that now, or just trying to kind of get the low-hanging fruit first?
It's trying to get to what we can get to most easily first to ease into it.
Okay, awesome. And then my last question, and we can talk more about this later, Christy, too, is just trying to understand the global warming potential limits that were developed compared to the industry averages. It seems like, those are 50%, the GWP limits were 50% more, and understanding kind of the reasoning behind that.
And I wonder, Courtney, if you can speak to this, that's great. Otherwise, I would need to follow up with you to give you a good answer on that.
Yeah, Mackenzie, I would love to follow up with you on some of that more detailed information and why those limits were selected. We did work with RMI and NBI to help figure out what those right numbers were.
Perfect. We will continue that discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So next, let's go to Jeffrey Ingolstad.
Hi, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
Awesome, thank you. This question might be more for Carol Pafford, but anyone to the team. The electric ready, as I've heard it referred to, provisions C405, 15, and 15.1. I'm curious if there is going to be more, or if there's going to be policy around building load studies and service sizing, and even busing sizing as it relates to equipment that's not selected yet, and how you prepare for that equipment that's not selected yet.
If you're going to add a branch circuit and you're going to add overcurrent, you must account for that when you start sizing your busing for your panel, and it could affect your service as well. But if it were EVSE capable, then no, because you're not adding that overcurrent. But the minute you add the overcurrent, the wiring, then that's at that point, that is when you start needing to provide a load study. Because
Okay.
it could install the equipment at any time, and you need to account for that ahead of time.
And not for EV charging, but for when you're adding the junction box for gas equipment, that's
Yes.
part of that new code. Okay. And how you
Yes.
kind of size for what you think the heat pump might be that replaces it in 6 years or something like that.
Need to be aware of that.
Okay. So, okay. Appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Christy.
I think we have about 1 minute left before the breakout room closes. Are there any other questions that we might be able to address in the remaining time?
Well, I see a comment from Kevin Compton asking who the correct people are to contact for generic IECC amendment questions, EV electrification and modeling. So I would suggest that myself, so charles.bartel, and I'll just put my email in the chat. .org, and Carol Pafford for electrical.
And there's a caveat to that. If it's concerning the actual locations of any of the spaces, then I wouldn't be the correct person to go to for the location of spaces. That would be Alan Yanong, and he has been answering those sort of questions. I would be answering any sort of electrical type questions.
Okay. I'll put our contacts in there. And so feel free to email us those questions. And if we need to forward them on, we'll make sure we get them to the correct individual when we receive them. But we really do appreciate everybody's attendance tonight and some great questions, and look forward to further questions. And the draft is posted, and feel free to add comments to that draft. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.